Chapter 14, Part 1 of It Happened in Egypt. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. It Happened in Egypt by Charles Norris Williamson and Alice Muriel Williamson. Chapter 14 The Desert Diary Begun, Part 1. I found out why Monny paid no attention to my buried letter. But the way in which I found it out, and several other things at the same time, is part of the desert trip. I am not a man whose soul turns to diaries for consolation, but I did keep up a bowing acquaintance with a notebook in Egypt. It helped me with my lectures, and in the desert it relieved my feelings. Looking over the desert pages, I am tempted to give them as they stand. Black Friday. Morning. The start's for Monday, and nothing done. Could I develop symptoms of creeping paralysis and throw the responsibility on Anthony? But too late for that now, and he may have to stay in Cairo for a day or two. Why did I leave my peaceful home? It's the lure of the Mountain of the Golden Pyramid. Last night, before I went to bed, read over my copy of Ferlini's letters, to gain courage. Gained it for a little, but when I think of that desert I'm supposed to turn into a happy playground for trippers, and not a tent hired or a prune bought, or an egg laid, for all I know, I wish Anthony and I had let Lark stick to our mountain. This is all Lark's fault, anyhow. He sprang the thing on me. Said it would be as easy as falling off a log. Said Cairo was full of Arabs whose mission in life was supplying tents and utensils for desert tours. People would be charmed with simple life, and me as universal provider. All I had to do was to supply cheap editions of the Garden of Allah, and plenty of dates, and hint that it was considered vulgar in the best circles to put on Peshmelba airs in the desert. With a few quotations, I should make them content with a loaf of bread, a cup of wine, and thingumbob. Why, they'd be falling in love with each other under the desert stars, and my principal occupation would be saying, "Bless you, my children." Sounded neat, and I remembered that, according to Bridget, Monny wanted the desert to take her. Thought it might be useful if I were in on the act. Abysmal beast of a dragoman who lurks round Mina House buoyed me up with false hopes. Said he had a fine outfit which he let, and threw himself in as guide. Plenty of everything, including cheek, for 15 people, the exact number who have put down their names to go. Some girls and parents are staying for a ball at the Semiramis, where I've tearfully persuaded the only soft-hearted officers I know to dance with them, otherwise the lot would have been on my hands in the desert. Had so much to do yesterday taking the crowd to Materia, where the Holy Family hid in a hollow tree, that I had no time to look at the Arab's outfit. Was inclined to save trouble and trust him, but saw Anthony a minute last night, and he urged me to inspect everything. Did so early this morning. Rotten outfit, tents like old patchwork quilts, pots and pans, etc., probably bought job lot from Noah when the ark was docked. Those keenest on desert taking them will be mad as hatters if it takes them in. Suppose I'll have to interview half the Arabs in Cairo today. Wish I had a ka or ba or whatever you get for an astral body in Egypt, and I could say to it, "Here, my dear chap, I trust you to do this job while I stay in Cairo and rest my features." Then he'd get the blame, and I'd disappear, never to be seen again. Or if he were a ka with cook accomplishments, maybe he'd bring off the thing all right, in which case I ought to turn up and take the credit, and marry Monny. Happy thought. Cook. Why shouldn't I sneak to Cook, and inquire in a careless way if they publish any pamphlet on how to do a desert tour? Later. Have been to Cook. No pamphlet, but a friend in need. Talk of casting bread on the waters. In Rome I cast a crust which I didn't want, and it's come back in Cairo with butter and sugar on it. Must have been 2 years ago in Rome when a young chap wrote to me to the embassy. Said he'd been disappointed in getting work he'd come abroad for, had seen my name, recognized it, was from my country, and could I use him as a stenographer or anything? I couldn't, but found him someone who could, and forgot him till I saw him this morning a fully fledged clerk at Cook's. Checking the impulse to fall on his neatly striped blue and white bosom, I invited him to lunch, and as a reward for what he calls past and present favours, he had given me a new life. What I mean to say is, he's promised to provide me not only with tents, but camels and camel boys and a camp chef, and waiters and wash bowls and a desert dragoman, and thousands of things I'd never thought of. It seems practically certain that since Napoleon no genius has been born as Slaney. Cleopatra would say that Slaney is the reincarnation of Napoleon, but neither Cleopatra nor anyone else, above all Sir Marcus Lark, is to know of his existence. Such is the disinterested self-sacrifice of this buttered and sugared crust, that it will do everything for me, while keeping itself and the organization which controls it completely in the background. The organization is too great to mind, and the crust, alias T. Slaney, thinks itself too small. Lark Limited considers himself a budding rival of the firm of Cook, but a deadly bud. If, however, Sir M. should come to hear that I had flown for succor to the enemy's camp, I fear it would be all over with the bargain for which Anthony and I are selling our souls. T. Slaney says he never shall know. He guarantees that Cook labels and other telltale marks shall be removed from everything, though time is short and there is much to do. He will be the power behind the tents, and I will be in them, absorbing all the credit. Saturday. All couleur de rose, thanks to Slaney. Should like to get him canonized. Many less worthy men, now deceased, have been given the right to put saint before their names. He has handed me a list, something less than a mile long, of articles which Biddy and I, as children, used to call Eadies and Drinkies. He has told me where the things can be bought, and has written a letter of introduction which secures me highest consideration and lowest prices. Also he has suggested a medicine chest, packs of cards, the newest games, cigarettes suited to European and Arab tastes, picture postcards of desert scenes, ink, pens, and writing paper. People forget everything they want on these trips, but you mustn't, said he. I have acted on all his suggestions, and feel as proud as if I had originated them myself. Sunday. My precious friend Slaney has made a large collection of Arabs, camels, tents, etc., and ordered everything, animate and inanimate, to assemble in the neighbourhood of Mena House this afternoon, in order to be inspected by me, and to be ready for a start early to-morrow morning. We are to have a sand cart with a desert horse for Cleopatra, who has tried a camel and found it wanting. I fancy she thinks a sand cart the best modern substitute for a chariot, and at worst it ought to be as comfortable. Slaney has promised a yellow one, cart, not horse. The horse, by request, is to be white. The other ladies are having camels. I daren't think of Miss Hassett Bean at the end of the week. The men, also, will camel. There is, indeed, no alternative between camelling and sand carting not recommended by the faculty but insisted upon by Cleopatra. Hope it will work out all right, and I am inclined to be optimistic. A week in the desert and the flowery oasis of the Fayoum, with the two most charming women in Egypt. There will be others, but there's a man each, and more. I shall have to look after Monny and Bridget, as Anthony is having his hands full with Cleopatra lately, and besides, he can't start with us. Something keeps him in Cairo for 2 days more, and he will have to join us near Tomeya. Sunday evening. Back from Great Pyramid, where I went to inspect the assembling army. Magnificent is the only word. The camels fine animals, but Anthony has promised the 3 best, borrowing these aristocrats of the camel world from Major Gunter of the Coast Guard. They have chased hasheesh smugglers, and have seen desert fighting. Were snarling horribly when I was introduced, but a snarl as superior to the common snarls of baggage camels as their legs are superior in shape. Biddy, Monny, Mrs. East, and Rachel Guest were there with Sir M. and Antoun, having been inside the pyramid and up to the top. Monny on her high horse, because Antoun says it will be better for the ladies to ride in the baggage camels. The others take his word, meekly, but she persists, and Anthony agrees to give her the camel he had meant to ride, the one supposed to be the most spirited. When he joins us, he will have the animal intended for her. When this bargain was struck between them, I thought his eyes looked dangerous, but she didn't notice or didn't care. Fenton tells me he has dreamed again of the red-faced man with the purple moustache. I laughed at his bugbear, and flung Colonel Corcoran in his teeth. By the way, nothing has been heard of C. by any of us since the day he handed in his resignation. Suppose he has gone back to England in the sulks. Monday night. I am riding in my tent, which is to be shared with Anthony when he arrives. I feel years older than when we started this morning. Middle age seems to have overtaken me. If I keep on at this rate, shall be a centenarian by the time we get back to Cairo. We made a splendid caravan at the start. Besides the train of camels ridden by my party from the Candace and Monny Gilder with her satellites, it goes against the grain, though, to call a bright particular star like Biddy a satellite. There were over 30 gigantic beasts laden with our numerous bedroom, kitchen, luncheon, and dinner tents, tent pegs,